my name is Jen. I am a coordinator with the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. I'm super excited to be here today as part of our At Home with Nature series. So I'm just going to give everyone a couple seconds to filter in and then we'll get started. Feel free to comment or ask questions. I have another device set up here, so if you see me looking to the side, it's just because I'm trying to check and see if anyone is commenting. So for this week, if you did tune in last week, Will taught us all about the wonders of water. So he talked about what water is available, how water moves in a cycle. Today we're going to kind of take that one step further, and we're going to be talking about stormwater and how exactly it moves in an urban area. So when we think about naturalized areas, maybe there's some grass, a meadow, things like that, it's going to soak into that soil really easily. A tiny bit of water is going to run off on the surface, but not so much. In an urban setting, however, when we have a lot of pavement, concrete, things like that, hard surfaces, that water can't exactly soak in as well as it would in a natural setting, so we tend to get a lot more runoff. So today we're going to focus just kind of exactly what happens to all that extra runoff as we go. So that's why we have the Enviroscape model, which is in front of me here. So the Enviroscape model is a really great way of actually visualizing what's going on across an entire watershed. So watershed might be a new word for some of you. Does anyone know what watershed means? I'll give you a hint. Everyone watching here today is in a watershed. So I'll give you a second to think that over. Awesome. So a watershed is an area of land where all the water drains to a central place, like a river or a lake or a stream. So we can kind of imagine this entire model as one big watershed. So all of the water, no matter where it hits on this model, will eventually make its way down to this kind of central lake area. So gravity is pushing that water all the way down into the water. So if we were, let's say, in Toronto region, so I live in the Don watershed, any water that hits the ground kind of outside my house is going to end up in the Don River. If we think about Toronto, some of that water is going to go directly into Lake Ontario. So for today, we're going to imagine that this is Lake Ontario. Awesome. So, when we kind of look at this watershed, we just want to be mindful of kind of what's going on around. So we will be going on a bit of a tour of this model just to see kind of what's going on. But when we think about this lake water, if we are imagining it as Lake Ontario, that water is really, really important for a couple different reasons. So if you live in, for most part, a lot of places around the GTA, your drinking water actually comes from Lake Ontario. So any water that comes out of your tap, whether it be your kitchen or your bathroom, that's all Lake Ontario water. We might also swim in it in the summertime. We also have a ton of really diverse wildlife that lives kind of in and around the lake. So it's super important that we're keeping this water as clean and healthy as possible. So when we're kind of touring about, so I'm just going to take you through the model. We'll do a couple of demonstrations, and then if you have questions at the end, I'll also take questions at the end. So we're going to start up kind of in our little residential area, which is up here. So we've got some houses, we've got some cars in the driveway, things like that. So let's think about what are some ways the water could potentially be contaminated up here. So I've got some coloring drops here. It might be hard to see at first, but it will make sense in a second. So in our driveway, maybe we wash our car. So we've got some nice bright blue soap on our car. The lawns of this neighborhood are also super green. So what are some ways that they might make their lawn nice and green? There's probably some natural ways that they can keep their grass looking green. But there's also probably some fertilizer. So we've got some fertilizer here. We're going to drop that on the lawns as well. some potential ways that we might be adding some potential pollutants into our neighborhood. If we kind of shift over to our industrial area. So this industrial complex here, they know that they're not supposed to be putting chemicals into the water, but they do have quite a bit of warm water they produce as a byproduct. And we'll talk about what that could mean in a second. All right, so then moving along to just kind of like down our little roadway here, we have this poor little car that has gotten into a bit of an accident. Accidents happen every day on the roadways. Sometimes, you know, things might spill out of the cars when they are in these accidents. So this car maybe leaked a tiny bit of gasoline, a little bit of oil. So as of right now, that's just kind of sitting out on our roadway. Okay. I see someone in the comments put road salt. Good, that is actually my next one that I was going to say. So we have, in the winter time, obviously we want to keep our roads as safe as possible. So we put road salt down on our streets and roads, our driveways, our sidewalks. Everything gets salted in the winter. So we have all that salt there. Perfect. And then if we think about our farming land, so we've got this nice little farm down here. This farmer has both a field with lots of crops. He has some cattle, so lots of big animals. So naturally, when you have great big animals that eat a whole lot of food, they produce a whole lot of poop. So we've got all this animal waste all around the farm. Now the farmer knows that this is really valuable product, so it's really high in nutrients. They don't want to get rid of it because they can actually use it for their field. So not only do they have it on the farmland, they also have it spreaded out on the field. So you can see our little tractor out here is spreading all of that manure. Awesome. So let's just take a look back now that we've kind of explored our whole watershed. Let's take a look at actually what is still going on. So as of right now, our lake looks pretty clean. I would drink that water still. There is some pollutants all scattered throughout this watershed, but as of right now, they're kind of confined to their original position. Now that's going to change a little bit if we start to add some rainwater. So one thing to really consider is how exactly rainwater is going to be moving through an urban area. So as I said before, urban areas usually have a lot more runoff. So cities have to do something with all that runoff. Otherwise we have flooded roads, parking lots, houses, all that stuff. So we have to make sure that we're channeling that water away safely. So to do this, we have something called storm drains. So storm drains are kind of those square, grate-like things that you often see in curbs, maybe in parking lots, things like that. It's actually going to direct that storm water away. Now storm drains are a lot different than our wastewater sewers. Wastewater sewers take all the wastewater from our house, so things that go down the sink, down the toilet, all of that kind of waste, and that's treated at a sewage plant. Stormwater, however, is not treated, so they just empty out the kind of excess rainwater into any body of water that's nearby, whether that's a creek or a river, just to hold all of that extra water. So when we think about how that impacts our watershed, when we start to add some rain, it's going to hit, your eaves troughs. It might go down your driveway into the storm drain. Some of it might drain directly into kind of a body of water. So all of that fertilizer, all of that soap that you washed your car with, that's all emptying out into a river and eventually our poor little lake here at the bottom. Now, things like fertilizer, soaps, they contain nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen. So when that gets into the water, that can cause a lot of harmful effects. So things like algae can bloom, and it can cause a lot of harmful effects to some of the creatures that are living nearby. Next we have our little factory area. So we're talking about how they know not to put chemicals down, but they do tend to release their warm wastewater. Now if we think about what kind of species live in Lake Ontario, they're not tropical fish. They are more cold water species like salmon and trout. So any sort of water that's going to go into the system that's a lot warmer, that can be also very harmful to them. Now if we kind of move over to our car crash, we've got all that oil, all that gas, which is really not something that we should be ingesting. And that's just kind of going directly into our waterways. If you've ever seen kind of like a rainbow pattern on, the road or on your driveway, that tends to be actually gasoline on the road. And then we kind of move along the roadway, so we've got all that gas, all that oil, car fluid leaking onto the road. We also have our salt. So at the end of winter, we don't go out and sweep all of that salt up. It tends to just sit on the ground until either snow melts and washes it away, or we get a really heavy spring rain. So we get all of that salt washes right into the water. And if you think about what kind of water we drink fresh water. I don't think there's anyone out there that really likes drinking a big glass of salty water. So obviously we don't want salt in our water. That goes for a lot of the organisms and animals living in the water as well. Something like a frog or a fish in this area is designed or is evolved into living in fresh water. So if we start adding all of this salt, it could potentially harm them. And we also have our farmer field over here too. So if he gets all the salt on his crops, it's going to be pretty bad. So then we have our farm. So when the rain hits, we might get some of that directly coming from our little cows here. So that can just wash right into our lake. Now the problem with waste is that it carries a certain bacteria that can potentially make us really sick if we ingest it. So we have some of that runoff that's coming from our farm. We also have to think of the field too. So if the farmer puts his fertilizer down a little too early, or if he puts it down and a huge rainstorm hits, that's going to potentially move all of that bacteria. So the bacteria that they release is called E. coli. So obviously we don't want any sort of E. coli kind of ending up in our water. So now that we've kind of gone through, we've given this poor watershed a really heavy rainstorm, let's check back in with our lake. So looks pretty gross if we compare it to what it was at the beginning of the video. I would not drink that now. There's a whole lot of chemicals and E. coli and bacteria and all that stuff. So definitely not something that we'd want to be consuming. So I think it's really important to note, if we want to keep our watersheds healthy and clean, any sort of action that happens on, within the watershed can potentially impact every single person that lives downstream. So we just want to be really cautious of what we're doing at home, making sure that we are being responsible with what we're doing, whether we're putting down chemicals in the lawn, washing our cars at home, things like that. We just want to be careful with what we're sending down the storm drain, because it's really important that only rain is going down our storm drain. So before we wrap up, I'm just going to check and see if we have any questions. I think a few. Awesome. Yeah, and someone said dog waste, Walkerton. Yes, so Walkerton was a big issue that was caused by E. coli making its way into the drinking water. Luckily, because of Walkerton, Ontario has way more stringent rules about water quality, so that something like that can't happen again. Awesome. Yeah, and someone said dog waste. I've even seen people throw their dog poop bags into the storm drain thinking that it's, you know, a wastewater system. So there's a lot of different ways that we can see these pollutants making their way in. If you are interested in learning more, on June 16th, we are having a webinar all about rain to runoff. So we're going to follow kind of the journey of a rain droplet. We're going to talk a little bit about what that might mean for wildlife that are living kind of in our catch basins. And we'll also talk about some things that you can do at home. So if you're interested, we'll put the link for that event in our comments below. But other than that, I want to thank everyone so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, I'll stick around in the comments for a little bit. But bye for now, everyone. Stay safe.